Okay, so we're going to be presenting some more information about COVID-19, but I wanted to start off with some disease terminology because the news is starting to talk a whole lot more about endemic, pandemic, and epidemic, and how we're looking at this particular virus or disease that is currently pandemic across the world. But what we have to consider is that coronavirus may be something that is going to be endemic in our environment going forward. And so that we can get past the notion that we will ever go back to a normal that does not include COVID-19. And so when a disease is endemic in a community, it means that it has existed and been maintained at a low and constant incidence over time. That's where pandemic flu, when it hit in 1919, and we saw the death from that, it has been endemic in our population since that time. It is the thought of many researchers in this area that coronavirus will be endemic in our environment. So we will continue to have waves that sometimes move to epidemic level. And that means when there's a marked increase of disease within a limited area affecting an ever increasing number of people. And that's kind of what these waves that we're seeing in the population, where it kind of goes down and starts to mimic an endemic disease, and people start to get a little bit more lax and a little bit more free. And then you start to see this curve go up again and becomes epidemic in different parts of the world. We've seen it happen in Africa, went to the UK, and now it is beginning the wave in the United States, as evidenced in the Northeast. It is anticipated that those states that have the major international airports that travel to many, but it will eventually move across the United States as Delta variant has done. The concern about the Omicron variant is that the transmittability, which we talked about in the presentation last week, is the R naught being somewhere between 3 times or 6 times, and some even estimate 10 times. It is doubling less than every 2 days in every place that it has been discovered. That is every 2 days, essentially, you have double the number of new cases than before. The only bright spot with this particular variant is that it does not seem to have the same level of impact as regards to severe illness. But again, we're not really sure about that until we get to the most vulnerable populations to be impacted. Most of the super spreader events, and I have a few of those linked there, have been around among people like young people at this is a super spread event that was identified in Australia. A doctor who caught Omicron at a Christmas party. These have been people who are relatively healthy, relatively young. And so we haven't really seen how it would impact in the more vulnerable populations. However, in the UK, there have been some people who have been hospitalized with Omicron, and there have been Omicron deaths that have been identified. Bringing it a little bit closer to home, our state is starting to turn red again. The case numbers are increasing in the state of Alabama. Luckily for us, the overall percent positivity among the states is around 7.3, but in Macon County, it is at 3.6, and that's why we remain moderate or yellow for the past 7 days. But we also know that testing has started to go down in these spaces as schools go off to their break. So we're encouraging you to continue to stay safe and to really consider how you come together over the Christmas holiday. And whether it be a celebration with family and or some religious services that might be scheduled, because hospitalizations are beginning to rise again in the state. At last week, we were at 333. If you remember, we're at 380 as of yesterday that are hospitalized, confirmed with COVID. Most of these are still Delta variant hospitalizations, but as we start to see Omicron move across the state, we'll see whether or not that impacts the hospitalization rates. Looking at the percent positivity rate for the university as we closed down in this last week, in the week 19, it was at 1.4% positivity for our campus test. We had about 71 samples that were ran this past week through the 19th, and with one positive. And again, as I mentioned last week, the lower number of the denominator, or the lower number of actual samples that were ran, even one case will show a significant increase. And that's why we went from 0 to 1.4. But overall for the semester remained at 3.5. And we feel really good about the mitigation that we were able to do and keep the numbers low on our campus. Now, what we would like to move to, and I will transition to Sister Erica Muhammad to talk us through the demonstration of the spread of virus, because we want people to be aware and concerned about the fact that this variant is much more transmittable. And so even when you're inside of your space with just a few number of people, you can still have significant spread of virus.
And while the video is loading, this was computer modeling that was done in Japan, and we can't see it.
Okay, 1 second. Let me.
And what they did, they modeled several different scenarios. So, okay, in the beginning of the video, you're going to see different locations like an airplane, a taxi. Then you'll see like classrooms and office places. You'll see a concert hall. So you'll see all these different scenarios, and they'll illustrate how the droplets and the aerosols are spreading. And it's very important to be able to visualize this, because the virus is invisible to the naked eye, but you want to be able to see the unseen. That could be very important in terms of how you personally interact. As Attorney James was saying, if you're traveling during the holidays, these are things you're going to want to take into account. Okay, and then here we go. So this is face-to-face contact. It's like on a bus right there, and you could turn the sound off. This is a subway, modeling the ventilation there, an airplane, a taxi. This is inside an office or a classroom. So you're seeing the spread. That's a concert hall. You can see how this could be a super spreader event. So he's making the point about speaking, singing, and coughing. So speaking, you're letting out 10,000 droplets per minute. Singing is 25,000 droplets per minute. Coughing is 15,000 droplets per minute. So he was making the point that singing is actually releasing as much as 2 big coughs. And here you see different type of masking with that N95 really stopping those droplets. And this is where he's talking about ventilation, how important ventilation is for the aerosols. So masking is one very important option in terms of using that N95, but your ventilation is equally important when you're in indoor spaces with other people, because you want to dilute those particles, because you want to have the least amount of particles going into your airwaves. So he said these are the 4 main points: the behavior, the distance in terms of not being up close on people, of course, we know that, the time you're around people, and the ventilation. So those were the 4 main points that this video was recommending that we take into account. So